Greetings to you all, our Facebook friends and YouTube friends, social media friends. Thank you all so much. We are back again tonight. Tonight we have Wendy MacDonald. Wendy is the admin for the Alienated Parents and Grandparents Peer Support Group. She's been actively advocating for children, for families, and also for grandparents. I'm so excited to have her on tonight because she's loaded with a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, and I know Kelsey. You know her very well, and I believe she has a lot of materials to share with us tonight. Um, Again, Kelsey, thanks for your time this evening. Always appreciate you know, being part of this podcast. For us to raise awareness. What we are doing is so important for our children, for future generations. If we can all speak out and speak out loudly, I think our children in the future can benefit from what we're doing now, because we all agree that children don't need to be separated from any parent. They have a right to be part of both of their parents. Nobody has the right to dictate how children should have access to parents, and nobody has a right to remove them from any parent's life. I mean, every child deserves to have both of their parents equally in their lives. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Unfortunately, we have the family courts deciding for children. Often at times, they believe it's in the best interest of children. Yes, to some extent, but majority of the time, I believe it's just way off. It's more about their personal agendas and what they can benefit from it. And it has nothing to do with children. It has nothing to do with the children's benefits. And we see people being falsely accused just for the sake of taking possession of children all to themselves. And I think any uh, normal society should recognize the fact that children need both parents. They need both parents to thrive. They need both parents to be successful in life. One parent cannot do it all. It takes two to raise a child. I guess you know much about Wendy. Anything you wanna share about her to our audience? And
Wendy, I think really Wendy understands the core issues that we really need to strive to keep children and their parents in a place where that they can be supported by their parents.
Mhm.
Uh, Wendy has been in this situation for a while. She's been a big advocate, and I think Wendy can speak for herself when it comes to everything that she's done. But I know
Yeah,
she works very hard and is passionate about what she does.
yeah. So
You know,
I'm
and
bringing Wendy. I'm bringing Wendy on now. Uh, Sorry, Kelsey, you were saying something. I just brought online. So
you
just go
know,
ahead and finish your thoughts.
I was just going to say that it's traumatizing as a child to have a parent removed from your life. And that
Yeah,
trauma stays with you forever. And it's not in your best interest to be traumatized in childhood. So
you're right.
um, people need to understand that the reason that the laws are in place and should be interpreted as they're written, and the reason there's things like the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, is because those things are in their best interest. And if we have institutions that aren't following them, well, that's up to our legislators to fall through and make sure that they do.
Right. Wendy, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. I really appreciate the fact that you accepted our invitation to to join us this evening. I know you are very loaded with information, and you've been advocating for children and families for quite a while. And you've been a very powerful voice for grandparents as well. And I really appreciate all the work. I'm actually a member of your Facebook group, and I really appreciate the work that you are doing. Uh, More so for our children, and also for grandparents who, by no fault of theirs, are not able to see their grandchildren, which is quite unfortunate. But that's the society we live in now. Hopefully, together with our voices, we can bring about some change. That's the hope. So thank you so much for for joining us this evening, Wendy.
Thank
Um,
you so much, Ben and Kelsey, for having me on tonight. It's such an important topic that we spread so much light on because people just don't understand it. And it's going to take an army to really educate the world about what's going on and about the corruption and about how our children are being affected mentally, emotionally, and physically with all the things that they go through with the mental health issues. And, it's more than just about raising healthy, productive children, it's about having a safe environment in a society as a whole.
mhm, that's true. That's true. But Wendy, one thing I would want to ask you, I know you've been quite involved. What's the motivation behind your involvement in this movement to create awareness for families?
Well, I began in the movement probably about 13 years ago. Due to my own divorce, my daughter became alienated. I have two children. One is not alienated, the other one is. I've seen the struggles that she's gone through in life um, due to her mental health. It doesn't get easier. This started when she was 12 years old. She's now 25. She's living with me again now. Um, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle every single day to maintain um, a peaceful home environment. She gets upset very easily, so very much on kick gloves. Um, Most recently, she is able to hold down a job, which is progress for her because she was never able to hold down a job before. Um, but it's a struggle, and it's like I hear a lot of people every day saying that they wish they had their children back. They wish they have their children back, but they have to understand when their children come back, their children are not their authentic self and the same person as they left as. They come back with a world of problems, and you really have to be strong and forthcoming and patient, patient, and whatever you believe in. If you believe in God, if you believe in a higher power, lean on them, lean on your support system, lean on your friends because you need them, and you need to stay sane because this is a very insane situation which could drive anybody mentally insane pretty quickly. um, so it's a matter of leaning on people, having as much support. Silence is not an option. You need to talk, talk, talk. And we really need more men coming out and talking as well. It's still a taboo subject when it comes to men. I find women are very vocal. Men kind of hide behind the wives or hide behind whoever is the target, who's in the main front, who's in front of them. So, just like domestic violence, we really need men to be coming out and standing up and talking about it. Our children don't have a voice. We have to give them a voice. Um, Now that my daughter is 25, she has a child of her own. She had him when she was 18, and I haven't seen him in 7 years
Hmm.
now. He's being raised by his maternal aunt, my sister, who basically essentially robbed him of not just his maternal side of the family, but his paternal side as well. He doesn't know anyone. He's very limited to who he's allowed to have contact with. That includes my older daughter, who also has a son of her own. Just found out that she's expecting her second child. It's a sad situation that the more children that come into our family, the more children that will be affected by this sort of domestic violence. And my 3-year-old grandson, her son, is not allowed to have a relationship with his 7-year-old cousin either. So it affects the children. My 3-year-old grandson, when this all started, was not even born when it started. But by proxy, because of association to me, he has been disowned by my sister, and as well as anybody on who has taken her side and what we refer to as flying monkeys, um, who do the dirty work for her, and she's able to hide behind them. So the more children that are born, the more children that are affected by it, and there's more children that weren't even here when it began. So they shouldn't be involved in any way whatsoever, but they are by association. Just like my oldest daughter's not allowed to have a relationship with her nephew by association because her and I are very close. So it affects an entire family unit. And that is one of the dead ringers. There's so many signs that we need to look at to know if it's an abusive situation or if it's an alienation situation, whether there's a target parent or whether that parent has actually abused the children physically or caused them harm. And with the parental dynamics, there is so many ways that parents can co-parent in a reasonable fashion. And I need to bring everybody back to the point of why these children are created. If you were in an environment where you dated your ex-partner, you fell in love with them, you had these children. These children were created out of the love you had for that partner at the time. So we need to bring you back to that point of when you were in love with that partner and not decided to start hating them, because the children were created out of the love that you shared. So they should still feel that love that you've had between them, and that's why that they are here, right? So we can bring people back to that time and stop the hatred. There's so many ways that people can separate now coming into 2023 that are so substantial and so easy, which really do not uproot the children at all. We have the nesting situation where the children stay at the in the home and the parents switch out, where the kids are not shuffled from home to home. Then we have the house sharing, and if you can actually form a relationship with your spouse, ex-spouse, that you can get along with, then you can live in the same house. One lives upstairs, one lives downstairs, two separate apartments, two dwellings, but the kids are there to, and the parents are there to rely on, and to have the kids rely on both of them equally. So we're coming up with different ways and different development that is going to be a less impact on the children and provide more stability for them. When it comes to single parent households, I am really not a fan of that word. For the simple fact is, if you have a mother and a father who want to be involved in the children's lives, just because there's one parent in the household, it does not mean it's a single parent household. A single parent household to me is when the other partner has died or does not want anything to do with the children or has left the environment. But you're not really in a single parent household if you have two willing parents who want to parent and co-parent together. Then the children benefit so much more from it, and it lessens the mental health problems. If we can get people to understand what they're doing to the children and the mental health problems that are going to be associated with this. If you love your children, do you want to see them hurt? And this is the reality. This is what we're looking at. This is what parents are doing. And it's like the ones who are sitting there saying that they're physically abusing the children. With the narcissistic personality disorder, it's projection, that they will project situations onto the target parent. And it's usually a situation that they have done and created themselves. and they're projecting it onto the other parent. And this is what worries me when people come up with the allegation that somebody was abusive, because this is the type of thing that a narcissist will use in order to eliminate the other parent. And once you eliminate the other parent, what you're doing is really showing, we know that proven society shows that same-sex parents are the biggest role model that any children can have in their lives, whether it's a boy or a girl. The father is going to be the biggest role model for the boy. The girl is going to have the biggest role model of the mother. And what we're really teaching our children with the dynamics of the relationships that we're having is we're teaching our daughters and we're teaching our boys not to respect society, that they get into a relationship and this is the normal way a relationship is. This is not the normal way a relationship is. And we need to train our children how to respect women, to respect men, and how men can respect women, because the dynamics are so similar. Just like we have bad parents and good parents, just like we have good grandparents and bad grandparents, we have to investigate to get to the truth of the matter, because we know that with the narcissistic personality disorder, and it's sad to say, but when their lips are moving, they're lying. And that's the reality of the narcissistic personality disorder. And we need to, one of the things that we're working on right now when it comes to the narcissistic personality disorder is the discovery of what they hate the most. And yes, they hate the truth and they hate speaking the truth the most. And they hate when we're not silent and the truth comes out. But another thing that they hate the most is embarrassment. They hate the fact that people will see through what they're doing. So we need to call them out and expose them. When I first got involved in this, I realized that working on the outside was not enough for me. I needed to actually work on the inside, because you need to work on the inside to find out what the solution is. When it comes to the politicians, when it comes to the judges and the lawyers, we say it's all about money. It's all about money. We need to find a way to touch on to the humanity side of what would they be like if they were in our position. If it happened to them, what would they expect? Right? And no politician who will not back this cause and put our children number one will not get my vote. And I run a group of over 3,000 people, and they will not vote for the politicians that think that our children are not important. Every children matters. Every life matters. Every parent's life matters. Every grandparent life matters. This has been a generational pattern. It does not only affect myself in my situation, it affects my children. It affects my grandchildren. It's going to affect my great grandchildren. It's going to continue on the line because it is a generational pattern. I've seen this pattern on the generation before me, and it will continue to the generation after. And if we don't stop it now and find the solution on getting people to work with us and understanding the dynamics of it, we're talking about, especially in 2023, how it's been described as a mental health crisis. Not only is it a mental health crisis, it's a human rights crisis as well. It's a crisis for the safety and sanity of our children. It's the kidnapping of our children's minds. They are so stuck in between because they have mom that they want to please and they have dad that they want to please, and there's no in between. They can't say, oh, I'm going to please dad today or I'll please mom tomorrow, because it doesn't work. They're not going to be able to please both of them and satisfy them both at the same time. So we have to give our children the negotiation tools that we can use ourselves as adults to negotiate everything that's in their best interest. And in order to negotiate, we have to teach our partners how to negotiate. It's always about give and take, give and take, give and take. And we have to see which way is going to be the most beneficial with the children in mind, keeping their ages in check and as well in your mind, thinking that with different ages, you're going to have a different setup throughout their lives, right? For smaller kids, they're going to have different rules, different setups than older kids. But the only way to really solve it is by getting right inside and finding as many people as you can that will advocate, and stop with the little departments of domestic violence, sexual abuse, family violence. It's all the same thing. Let's all classify it what it is, domestic violence, and find a way to end it as a whole.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Kelsey, do you have any follow up question for? I have quite a few questions here, but go ahead if you have any questions for Wendy. Kelsey.
Um, why do you think, Wendy? What you've been doing this for a while? What do you think are the sticking points? Why are people not understanding the challenges here, and what could help them understand that this is a significant issue?
I think one of the biggest challenges is the breakdown of communication. I find that is a huge, huge one, because what happens is we always have three sides to a story, right? We always have his side, her side, and the truth, right? So with today's world, because it's such a conventional, we're trying to move into 2023, and we have to remember that there are two male homes now. There are two female homes as well. So we have to add this to the mix. And the thing is, what happens was one parent will go and say something to their side of the family. Another parent will go and say something to the other side of this family, but nobody's actually helping, because everybody just wants to run with what they're being told. Nobody wants to investigate. Nobody wants to look at the evidence. And if a person who is in the middle and is getting both sides does not compare notes, does not compare stories, does not ask each side what happens, or try to investigate the matter, then they're only going to take the side of what story they believe the most. So we really need to get people to understand that it's a huge thing when it comes to family court and false allegations. I am not a believer in anything that anybody says, especially if I don't know them. This does cause a lot of skepticism with me. Somebody comes to me, the first thing I want to do is see the evidence. I want to evaluate the situation. I want to look at the documentation. I will never ever take somebody's word for anything, just because I know how many people have been affected by false allegations. False allegations can follow you the rest of your life,
Yeah.
and they could destroy your life, right? So people have to understand, start comparing notes, start asking, find out if there's something that you can do to help. Even if you have a time alone with that child, always say positive things about the other parent. Always say, that parent loves you. Um, a lot of things that happened just in my own case. People think that silence, by staying silent, if you have a child, say, who's degrading their parent or putting them down or something, you have an ex-spouse who may not say anything. Is that the best thing for the child? No, because the spouse should be saying, that is your parent. Please don't talk about your parent like that, regardless on how you're feeling right now. I know you're angry. Let's work it out. But I will not tolerate you talking about your parent like that. And this is what a lot of the parents are not doing. They are not adding positivity to their children's lives. So all they're getting is a negative aspect from everywhere. If they have other people involved in the situation, it's negativity, negativity, negativity. Where's the positivity come from? How is a child going to live a positive life if they are not being taught positivity? So every way we have to understand what we do now with our children, we are shaping their future. We are shaping their lives and who they're going to turn out to be. And this is what people need to understand. You can have a very well-grounded, stable child, or you can make the decision to have an unstably mentally ill child that you constantly have to be the fixer of. And a lot of the problems with the target parents, they are the fixers. They always want to fix everything. They don't want to have dysfunction in their family. They don't want to have conflict in their family. And you can't stop the world. I made a comment to my daughter the other day because she's expecting her second child. And I said to her, I said, I just hate the fact that another child is being born into the dysfunction in this family. And she says, yeah, I know, Mom, but I can't stop living my life because of the dysfunction in our family. All we can do is make it as non dysfunctional as we can, because that's where they're going to see it all from. They're going to see all the positive sides because we don't argue. People who have an argument, if it goes back and forth, people who have an argument, and one of the key signs with a narcissist is when two people have an argument, they usually, two adults can communicate the disagreement together and keep it between themselves. It doesn't have to escalate. But when it comes to a narcissist, it has to escalate because they have to be the first one to get their story out and get their version of it told immediately. So we all have to understand how to deal with the narcissist and how to fight back. And what we're doing is not only fighting for ourselves, but fighting for our children and fighting for our future grandchildren as well and their children, because this is just going to get worse before it gets better. And we need to stop the effect on the community before our kids. And one of the things that I hear a lot was when a kid is unruly or unstable in any way, what's the first thing people say is, what kind of parents do they have? Right? But when you're a good parent who has to fight against an alienating parent, you are also brought into drama and conflict and dysfunction by proxy. Even though you're not causing it, even though you don't want it, it takes two people. And when people will sit there and say, oh, well, you guys are dysfunctional, it's like, I'm trying to stop it. But you're automatically brought into it, right? Because they want to start the conflict and you can't stop it. So by default, you are already associated with it.
Wendy, um, I know you've been doing this for 13 years plus. You have a lot of experience, um, in the field. Um, what do you think is one of the stumbling blocks to get shared parenting recognized in Canada? I know the bar association is, you know, a factor of it, but in general, what are your take on getting like a shared parenting recognized in Canada, so these children don't have to go through what they're experiencing now.
Well, share parenting is extremely important, and we have to keep on speaking out about it, and how we're going to go about doing it. And we hold regular Zoom meetings every week to come up with solutions. We hold a peer support based group first, and then we talk about solutions and strategies of what we can do in order to get share parenting into the light. And so far, what we've been doing is coming up with all these different types of programs that are very, 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 very detailed. Like, I mean, there's no stone left unturned about different scenarios that can happen. And what we need to do is what we've been working on is taking a lot of the leg work out of what the judges have to do and doing it ourselves. Because if we could present the case in a reasonable way and in a standardized way where judges will be able to understand it, when you look at it, when you go into a courtroom, judges do not read half of the stuff they are presented with. So, this is where we talk about community based programs where if anything is questioned, we can say, we've done all the work. We've decided what is in the best interest of that child. We've decided how this is going to work. We do up parenting plans, negotiation tools and strategies, and everything that we can do in order to work with each parent in order to come up with a reasonable solution that's going to not only benefit their children, but going to benefit them as well. Because a give and take situation is where everybody gets a payoff at the end, right? So you need to be able to appeal to the ex partner of what their payoff is and what their requirements are. And if your children are of age, we also have the voice of the child that we do as well. Whereas usually judges have an easier time when your child is 12 years old listening to them, and they usually do have more of a say in court depending on the maturity level of the child. So if the child says that, depending on the severity of alienation, because I don't want to say every case is the same, because there are three different levels of alienation. There's the mild, the moderate, and then the severe. Severe is when your child has cut absolutely no contact with you whatsoever. And so if you go through the stages, it's a matter of understanding where you fall and what category you're in order to best help your case. But what we really want to do is take the decisions out of the judge's hands and make it a community based. Because, like I say, when we put our families in a judge's hands who do not know us, it basically comes down to who is the better actress or actor, right? And it's like, if you can pull it off, you're going to win. If you don't pull it off, you're going to lose, right? And before you even walk in a courtroom, a judge just has to skim through your paperwork, and by the time you walk into court, that judge already knows what side he's going on. So this is the thing, is to get rid of all the bias before they walk in there and say, look, judge, we've already done all the work. There's no stone left unturned, and our children are going to come out the real winners in the end.
Sure. Kelsey, any follow up question?
Um, I keep thinking about politicians, and I know there's been a lot of work done to speak with politicians and to help them understand the challenges that families face, and that targeted parents face, and that the children and the grandchildren will face. And some politicians seem very understanding and very supportive, and others aren't. Is Do you think there's a way to get through to politicians and have them understand these serious impacts and have them act in a way that is in the best interest of the children?
I think if we can keep on showing them the statistics of what is happening to our children and the diagnosis and the mental health concerns that we have, not only as parents ourselves, but as the general population, I think they will um, start seeing the light eventually. But, one of the things that I always refer to is, look at how long it took women's rights to come to fruition, right? Or gay rights, where people are able to marry the same sex, right? And I always refer to these two causes because it took years and years and years for these two things, right? And that's the whole thing of not giving up, is eventually it's all about education. And I've talked to some politicians that, and just because I've been living through it for so long, it kind of becomes, which I seem to take for granted because I have such a large circle, that I forget that there is people out there that still have never heard of parental alienation. Right? So it's like when I talk to the politicians, the first thing I'll ask them is, have you heard of parental alienation? And if they come back and say no, I'm like, I got a lot of work to do. That's a challenge for me, is to educate these politicians and say, for 1 minute. But see, the thing is, and in order to be a politician, the way you need to look at it is they're very unempathetic. Unempathetic, they don't even know the first thing about empathy. For the simple fact is, empathy is the ability to be able to put yourself in somebody else's position, right? And what they say is they'll come back with, oh, I feel sorry for you. Oh my gosh, does this really happen? Well, feeling sorry for somebody is sympathy. That's different than empathy, right? And it's trying to reach their interpersonal human side and say, imagine if your child was ripped away from you. And speaking as a mother, my daughter said something to me very interesting the other day. And I hear a lot of parents say this about grandparents too, which is really annoying, because it's like parents will sit there, if they have an issue with their own parents, they'll sit there, oh, well, he's not your child. Well, he's not your child. Well, he's not your child. But in a sense, they are, even though the grandparent didn't actually give birth to that child. They gave birth to their parents. So essentially, any child becomes that grandparent's child, right? Like my daughter and I will go back and forth. She'll be like, oh, mom, can you change the baby or whatever? And I will be like, I didn't give birth to this child. And she's like, she looks at me, she goes, well, essentially you did, because you created the eggs that made this child. So it's like it made a lot of sense, right? So it's a generational pattern that is following down the lines, because our children wouldn't be here without us. Their children wouldn't be here without us, right? Like it has to start somewhere. And this is the thing that people need to understand, that if you're looking at it and you're saying, like, if people have an argument or are falling out and it's two adults, they can choose to go their separate ways. But when it comes to parental alienation, it affects every generation beyond, right? And we need to find the politician's human side, the empathy side, the side that says, oh my gosh, if this happened to my child, I know how I would be devastated, right? And we've had lots of meetings with politicians. And when they're in face to face in front of you, they're, oh, yes, we care. Oh, yes, we care. They're dedicated. They're giving us their time. They're focused. But then as soon as that meeting's over, you don't hear from them again. Right? So, like, I mean, I even considered running for a politician. And this is the thing, like, I have a politician on one of my groups and who highly recommends it, and she's willing to walk anybody through it who wants to join to be a politician, because we need more people who understand the situation. And you have to understand, when you're talking to politicians, these are usually people who have intact families, who are still married, who have kids and raise them with their partner as well, right? So when you have to spell it out in layman's terms, because it's like starting from scratch. You've got to put yourself back into that place that you didn't know what parental alienation was, right? When you started figuring it out, how do we all discover what parental alienation is? We know something's going on with our children, but we can't figure out what. And we know we're not doing anything that is setting them off. So it's just like anything, right? It's education, education, education. Eventually we'll get there.
Right. I have a question on YouTube for you, Wendy, and this is for um, a viewer who is called Moy. And the question is, how can we convince politics to do something when people who are concerned do not even be here to listen to people that try to help them? I guess it goes back to the gender uh, discussion we are having earlier, and somehow connected to it.
Okay, how to convince more politicians to step up. You need to find the right politicians. And, we've actually started branching out to other organizations, including domestic violence organizations and women's shelters and stuff. And we've actually come across politicians who are actually domestic violent advocates as well. Um, One of the politicians that we've come across actually works at the police station for victim services. So we need to get these people involved to understand. We also do a lot of rallies and stuff, and we've have lots of pictures where we've gone to politicians offices with our signs. We've knocked on the door, we've spoken to them face to face, because it's easy for a politician to ignore your phone call. Very simple. But they have a harder time when you're actually knocking on their door and you're in front of them at the office. They have a harder time to ignore you then. So those are some of the avenues that we have taken, and you'll be surprised. You may be like only a couple people out there, even if you have to grab a friend or family member, whatever. You may be only a couple people out there, but you do end up trumping up the support when you are out there, and you'll be surprised at actually how many people are out there that still don't even know that parental alienation groups exist, and they are in this position as well.
Sure.
So keep speaking, keep advocating, and keep talking.
Mhm. And we were talking about some of the gender issues earlier. I mean, all across the social media platforms, there are a lot of groups that represent men's rights. It appears that it's not really helping the cause. Um, Canada for sure focuses more on the children than the parents. In that sense, what Like, what direction do you think? You think the gender issue need to be taken out of this whole discussion and focus
Gender
more on the
issue
children?
Gender issue is a big issue. It's like those memes I really hate. It's about she's a narcissist or he's a narcissist. It's like, no, it's not a he she issue. It's a parent's issue, because it's not he she. Gender has to come out of it, and it's not about men's rights. It's not about women's rights, and I am big on children's rights. That is what we need to change our focus to. And men's rights and parents' rights, like I've mentioned before, it takes two parents to make a child, regardless of any capacity, any which way that child is created. It takes two people to make the child, right? So it's we've got to remove the gender, and we've got to all work together. We have to stop being, I come across people who are very angry against men or very angry against women because that's who they're being alienated from. And you have to learn to be able to isolate your own case in order to help other people. Some people want to be advocates, but they're too wrapped up in their own hurt, their own trauma, their own anger to be good to themselves, let alone anybody else. So you need to be able to overcome your own trauma first in order to be able to help everybody else. And men, and I can't say this enough, men's gotta start speaking out more. Most of the comments, most of the things that I come across are the women speaking. And we need to hear more from the men. It's just like domestic violence. Men can be victims too, just like women can. Just like parental alienation. Men are victims just like women are. We need to learn to isolate our own personal case and be able to understand that this is not a gender issue, not even close. It's a child's right issue.
Thank you, Wendy. Kelsey, any follow up question or additions to the
Well,
question?
I just like to really highlight and touch on that again, that it's not a gendered issue. The behaviors are the behaviors. If it's working to remove a child from the parents, then that is a drive that will continue. And we need more people, including the courts, including the practitioners who are out there who are doing some of this work already, to really understand what those behaviors are, how they affect the children long term, how they affect multiple generations, how that harm, that trauma that's caused is almost irreparable, not entirely, but almost irreparable. And how it really twists the minds, because right now we have ideological groups that are making it about gender when it's really not. It's about looking at the behaviors and identifying where the harm is coming from and working to resolve it. Because, like Wendy said, it took two parents to make the child. It takes two parents to raise a child. And we all want, every single parent wants their children to be better off than they are, to be whole children who can be part of our society, can hold down jobs, can work, can contribute. I think that's what every parent wants.
And to add to what you just said, it takes a community, a whole community as well,
Yeah,
to raise a child.
yeah,
Um, it's really unfortunate that uh, we see the family system so broken right now that for somebody sitting on the side may think that it is the dad or the mom that is struggling, but the ones that suffers the most are the children. They are the ones that pay the price. Um, but just going back to the gender issue again, is it? I'm just trying to understand why, because most of the advocates I've come across truly are the women that are speaking for the men, and it doesn't add up, right? And the men are truly the ones that are a lot of time are on the receiving end. but somehow the men are not speaking, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I mean, the men would rather, you know, play behind the scenes, complain, cry, be emotional, but don't want to talk about the issue, for help. It doesn't make sense. Is it because of shame, or it is just a man thing?
It's because of a lot of things. It's because of the stigmatization that men are supposed to be tough beings, not cry, not show emotion, and not be vulnerable. And it's embarrassment, it's shame, it's their genetic makeup. Um, but it's not going to get better until start men more men start speaking up about it, and we need to get rid of the stigmatization of why men can't speak up against domestic violence and why they aren't speaking up against domestic violence, because man can be involved in domestic violence and can be hurt, especially if you have a strong woman, just as much as women can be hurt by men. So we need to take the stigmatization out and let every man that you come across know that it's okay to talk. It's okay to speak out. It's okay to get it off their mind and get it off their chest and to be open and vocal, that there's no judgment, and it's a part of healing. And if they don't release it, they can't heal. And what happens when we do hold things back and keep it inside? Then what happens? It comes out in the least expected way, and then you end up unleashing on the wrong person or vocalizing it a way that you don't plan to. But the anger and the rage builds up, and it's very strenuous as well, not only mentally, but it's also very strenuous on the heart. So it's so important, and men are dying younger and younger because of heart related issues and heart attacks because of stress and overwhelming anxiety that they're not able to release. And it's the same that's happening with women, because stress plays a big part on our heart and weakening it. So it's so important to let every man know that they can speak out, that they have a safe place, and no judgment will be given.
Because you were going to say something earlier.
Well, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. One, um, being that men do need to speak up. A lot of men, when this happens, they may not even know that they're an alienated parent. They might say, "Well, I was angry," or another one I've heard of lately is men who were incarcerated and they come out of prison and they try to reestablish a relationship with their children, and they get told that they can't because they've been in jail. They don't get to see their children anymore, and that's not something that's supposed to happen in Canada. But men often just say, "Well, there is something I've done that has caused this to happen," and they don't realize that the external influence that has been placed upon their child or children. So, so often alienated parents, and this is mothers as well as fathers, they think there is a reason why they're not having a relationship, and they don't understand that they're not alienated. So it's hard for them to speak out when they don't even know what's going on. So that's why, Ben, shows like yours, it's so important to get the word out there to more people so they can understand some of the challenges that are being faced, to understand what alienation is, to understand what coercive and controlling family violence is, and really be able to then speak up and say, you know what, that happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to other people. Because I think that's how a lot of us end up end up here is that it's happened to us. It's happened to people that we know and people that we love, and we want to take a stand and we want to stand up and say this isn't acceptable in our Canada.
Wendy, we're almost about to wrap up. Any final words for our audience tonight?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch a bit on that too, of what Kelsey was saying about fathers and being in prison, and that's the thing. And and I'll be the first to admit it, it's not just fathers, mothers as well. And I'm actually living proof of something that you just said, Kelsey, because um I was actually a child who was in juvenile detention at 14, 15 years old. I went through the juvenile system from 14 to 18. I did spend a week in jail after going through youth detention and stuff. And today I am still I've never had a criminal charge or anything against me as an adult, but even today, I just turned 50 in August, and it's still being used against me as a 14-year-old child. So this is the thing, right? And I'm a proof and prime example that people can change, and people can change their lives around, and that just because you spent time in jail and you made stupid mistakes, and you could have made them when you were young or a youth or a child, doesn't make you a bad person. It's called being human, and
Mhm.
we all make human mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Kelsey, any final words from you?
I would just like to thank you for coming on tonight, Wendy. It's great to hear your perspective, and I know it's challenging. I'm sure it's challenging to share what you've shared, and maybe can even activate some of the emotions that go along with it. But it's really important that more people share, what they've gone through, because what you've said tonight, Wendy, about the generation after generation after generation, it really happens, and it continues to happen. I'm taking a course on parental alienation, and one of the things they teach us is to look back at least 2 to 3 generations and try to understand what are the relationships between the people. Is it sometimes it's all the women that get alienated from the family. Sometimes it's the men who get alienated from the family. You can look and say, well, what happened to this aunt or that uncle, and why are they not part of the family anymore? Or why are they very closely part of the family in an unhealthy kind of way? So those generational traumas do propagate from generation to generation until they're stopped. And for the kids who grow up in them, it's just normal. But it's not always a healthy situation, especially when alienation is happening. So there needs to be an external understanding, an external force, an external motivator to change that behavior so that the traumas, the alienation doesn't continue to happen from generation to generation, and so that the kids can have two parents in their lives.
As well
Wendy,
as all their extended family.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Ben and Kelsey, for having me on. It's been a great discussion.
yeah, thank you so much, Wendy, and I hope that we can have you back at a future date. Kelsey, thank you so much. My final thoughts on all this is that we all have a responsibility to make sure that our future generation do not have to repeat the same mistakes that have been repeated now. This didn't start yesterday, not a week or a month ago. It's been going on for years. Wendy's been doing this for 13 years, and so it's evident that it's been going on for many years. But for some reason, we don't have many voices, fighting to make sure that children become children instead of putting them through a lot of trauma, a lot of emotional yo-yos, and the struggles that they have to go through when they become adults in life. Whatever they see now, like you're saying, Kelsey, they repeat it, down the road. Uh, I mean, a lot of people have gotten to a point where they realize that if family or marriage is not as important anymore, and so they can have a child here, walk away, go mind their business somewhere else. But that's not how things should be. That is not what you know uh, it should look like. At the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to protect the institutional family and to protect children. Children are everything that we have, and if we destroy them now, they will grow up broken. They will grow up with a lot of mental health issues, and it will not help society at all. And so, thank you so much, to our audience, and thank you for being with us tonight. Again, we are back. We are back next Sunday at the same time, 6 p.m. Eastern. And so I look forward to having you on again for next week. Have yourself a very good evening.